Susie, is Rosalie coming? Okay. She asked a question last week that I have an answer to. Oh, there's Gary. Okay.
Thank goodness. So what country are we going to visit today?
We're going to Macedonia today.
Can you draw Macedonia? That's
Yes.
the important thing.
I can draw anything. You've seen that. The question is whether it looks good or not. But I can draw it.
Well, it's in proportion.
Yes. Hello. Rosalie? Oh. Nope. Huh? Do you, no. Do you have another marker? This one is kind of dead. Okay, you know what? Actually, I can get by with this.
You're okay?
Yeah,
You know, usually I bring it in with, well,
I'll live.
you'll live.
Yep.
We'll bring it in.
I wanna go over a situation that happened to me this week that was unusual for me. Then I want to go over a question that Rosalie asked last week that I thought I knew the answer to, and I didn't. I got it wrong. So I want to make a correction on that so that we all have correct information. And then I want to start the country of North Macedonia, which is just above Greece. Okay, so I got a call 2 days ago from Mount Sinai, and they said, Mark, we have a couple who just lost their child who lived for 1 day. Can you, they need somebody who's very compassionate and empathetic. They're devastated, of course. Can you please talk to them and sort of counsel them on what they should do at this point? So I called them, and of course, I mean, we all understand that's just, there's nothing worse. There's just nothing worse than losing a child, especially that young. And so what I told them was, okay, halakhically, the child is classified as a nephel. A nephel meaning a child who does not live 30 days. That could be a stillborn baby, a premature baby who dies, and in this case, one that is born and just doesn't make it to 30 days. Why 30 days? Why 30 days? Because the rabbis decided that 30 days is the point at which a human being gets a soul. You become ensouled. You have a soul that comes into you after 30 days. Now, so the nephel comes under a slightly, requires some slightly different ideas. The child the child goes through tahara, ritual cleaning and washing, if the family so desires. All Orthodox families will choose tahara. Many non-Orthodox families will choose to waive it, which is the reason why you can go to the funeral and the family can view the deceased before the funeral. If the deceased has undergone tahara, then usually there is no viewing after that procedure has taken place. Okay. The child goes through tahara if the family wants it. If it's a male child, the child needs to be circumcised. The child has a funeral. The child is wrapped in a white sheet and has a funeral. The family is not obligated to recite Kaddish or observe Shiva. Now, the Shulchan Aruch says Kaddish is not recited, Shiva is not observed. But I think the better way to put it is that the family's not obligated to. Of course they can if they want to, and I can't imagine a family that would not want to, but they're not obligated to. And the reason for that probably is that, in the ancient world, so many children didn't make it past 30 days. So many children died that I think the rabbis were trying to be compassionate and say, look, you don't have to go through this every time because it's just so difficult. All right, so I'm doing that funeral this Sunday. The interesting part for me is that I asked the family about the circumcision and told them that halakhically it's required, and that it could, in fact, just be a very, very little cut on the foreskin, and they could do it if they wanted to. And they said, "No, Rabbi, we can't. We just can't do that. Would you please do that?" And I thought, okay, the one thing I said I would never do is be a moil, just never. But in this case, how can I say no to this couple? I just. So at 4:30 today, I'm going over to Mount Sinai, and I'm doing this modified bris. And I called one of my rabbinical colleagues, who's a nurse, and I asked her, okay, how do I need to do this? I want to make sure this is okay, because I've never done something like this before. And she told me how to do it, and it doesn't sound very involved or very difficult at all, just a tiny little cut. But it's just an interesting situation that had me go back and look through the halakha to find out what's required, what's not required, and then advise the family, this is what the halakha says, what would you like to do? And I do that with my congregation. I do that all the time, because I think it's our job as rabbis to teach what Jewish law says. If you want to follow it, that's your decision. But you should know what the tradition says. Okay, so I'm doing that later this afternoon. I'm doing the funeral on Sunday. And of course, I've done funerals for several children, and they're the worst. They're the most difficult funerals for me to get through as a rabbi. And I'm sure most rabbis feel that way. And so what I plan to talk about, because the child only lived for less than a day, there are no words, nothing, to make this situation any better or to comfort them. There's nothing, zip. Which is why in the Torah, when Aaron loses his sons Nadav and Avihu, when God incinerates them, the next phrase is Vayadom Aharon, and Aaron was silent, because there's just nothing. So what I'm going to say, there's a beautiful teaching in the Kabbalah that says we are on this earth, our souls live in us on this earth for a period of time to work out previous stuff, cosmic stuff. And that once we have worked out that stuff, our soul elevates to the next level and ultimately elevates to God. And so there is I think it's beautiful teaching that says, some souls don't need to be here very long to work out whatever they had to work out. Some souls are so pure and so righteous when they come into this world that they don't need to be here for very long before they can ascend to the next level. And so that's what I'll be talking about on Sunday, and it doesn't make it better. It doesn't. Nothing makes it better. But, okay, let's go one at a time. Gary. Okay, folks, we got to use the mic. Or, right there. Or Susie's going to come at me, okay? And I don't want to incur Susie's wrath. So please use the mic.
So, Rabbi, I want you to respond to my comment. The degree of obligation of this family or any family feels depends on their level of observance.
Oh, of course. Of course. The degree that a family responds to this will depend on their level of observance. It has been my experience that in times of either death or birth, or of course bar mitzvah, families choose generally to lean towards the side of more tradition. In terms of the big life cycle events, they fall back on, which is a beautiful thing for our people. That's a good thing. Yes, I agree with you. Yes. Hold on. Hold. Okay. I thought the soul wasn't there until after 30 days. What a great question, because that is what I told you, and that is true, and that's what the rabbis say, but it's not what the Kabbalah says. So remember that rabbinic Judaism and mystical Judaism are not the same thing. The Kabbalah talks about different things than the rabbis, and they interpret them very differently. So, good question. And last one, Joette? Something along the same lines. Okay, let us move forward now. So, Rosalie asked a really great question last week. Are the terrorist organizations Sunni or Shia? And I told you most of them, all of them, were basically Shia. And I was wrong. I went back afterwards and I looked at everything, and so I want to tell you what the situation is. So if you look up here, on the left side we have the terrorist organizations who are affiliated with the Sunni side of Islam. And they are Al-Qaeda, whose imam is Anwar al-Awlaki. Some of these imams are dead. Some of them are still alive. For Hamas, it's Sheikh Ismail Hassan Yassin, who is dead, but they still follow his philosophies. The Al-Qassam Brigades, they were named after the cleric Izz ad-Din. And ISIS, who followed their cleric Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, whom we assassinated in 2019. On the Shia side, we have the Houthi rebels who are at this very moment attacking ships in the Red Sea. Their imam is Abu Jibril and Hezbollah. And they follow the Ayatollah Khomeini, and their current leadership is Hassan Nasrallah, and they follow Khomeini's teachings. So then the next question becomes, well, if Iran is so involved in sponsoring these organizations, as most of the world believes, then why would Iran, which is a Shia nation, a nation of majority Shiites, be sponsoring Sunni terrorist organizations? Because there is such animosity between the Sunni and the Shia. And the answer is very simple, and all of you will understand. They have a common enemy, the West, and specifically Israel. And so, if you can unite with your enemy, you can unite with your little enemy to defeat the big enemy. Okay, so most of the terrorist organizations actually are Sunni, except for Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels. Yes? Yes, so Zisel says it follows the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yes, absolutely. Okay, now that all that's done, let's move on to North Macedonia. So North Macedonia, you'll see on the map on the left, this is Greece, and this is North Macedonia here. To the left is Albania, and to the right is Bulgaria. And we know Macedonia, we know that name from where? Alexander the Great, absolutely. He was Macedonian, right? And for most of history, Macedonia and Greece sort of equaled each other, basically. And so Jews have been living in, let me say this. So why is it now called North Macedonia? And that's because the region was part of Yugoslavia. And in 1991, there was a movement for independence, and they became Macedonia. And then Greece was upset that they were calling themselves Macedonia because Macedonia had been so equated with Greece, and many Greeks considered themselves Macedonians. So they had to specify that their new country now is called North Macedonia. All right. So there have been Jews in North Macedonia since Alexander the Great. They came over, very few, but there were some as slaves in Alexander the Great's armies and processions that came through as he conquered what we now call the Middle East. Also, many arrived during Roman times, fleeing persecution in other Roman territories. So if we're talking about Alexander the Great, what year are we talking about? 300 BCE. If we're talking about Roman times, when are we talking about? Yeah, a little bit into BCE, but mostly the Common Era. Because the Romans defeat the Greeks in very, very late BCE, just before the year 0. All right. And we know about Jewish presence in North Macedonia from a letter from General Agrippa to the Emperor Caligula, in which he spoke about Jews living in the area. In 165 CE, there was a Roman named Tiberius Polycarmus, and he's called the father of the synagogue because he converted his villa into a synagogue. So we have, they don't have that villa anymore, but we have the writings that say he did it. So now, when we get into the medieval period, till around the 14th or 15th century, the 1400s and the 1300s, we have a fairly large community of what are called Romaniote Jews. Romaniote Jews. Has anyone ever heard that term before? Okay, good. Because we need to learn about these folks. Yes, but that's not this. That's completely different. Yes. So Romaniote Jews are a third. Basically, we divide the world today into Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews. And in more modern times, we've added the category Mizrahi Jews, which are Jews coming from the Middle East, right? There is a fourth subcategory, and they are called Romaniote Jews. And they're very small, but they are one of the oldest Jewish communities in existence today. And they are certainly the oldest Jewish communities in Europe. Do they still call themselves Romaniote? Yes. The word Romaniote comes from, what it means is basically the Eastern Roman Empire. Jews from the Eastern Roman Empire. And they were Greek-speaking, were Greek-speaking Jews who lived alongside other Greek-speaking Jews from the Byzantine Empire. So remember, we talked about the Byzantine Empire, and that continues up until when? Do we remember? When the Ottoman Turks come in, which is when? 1453 is when the Ottoman Turks end the Byzantine Empire. So that was very good, Rosalie, very good. Very good. Well, it was a good guess. Okay, so up until 1453, we had the Byzantine Empire that was filled with Greek-speaking Jews. When the Ottoman Turks come in and defeat and end the Byzantine Empire, you'll recall that these Greek-speaking Jews are now living under Ottoman Turk rule, and they're still Greek-speaking, but over the course of time, then Jews in that area are united by a common language, which is Arabic. And of course, if 1453, what do we have coming up in 1492? The expulsions from Spain. And so then we have many Sephardim coming in. So, the Romaniote Jews spoke a language called Yevanic, Y-E-V-N-I-C, which is a combination of Hebrew, Aramaic, and Turkish. So it's a combination language exactly like Ladino, exactly like Judeo-Arabic, exactly like Yiddish. So they spoke this language. Nowadays they speak Greek, modern Greek. And interesting for these Romaniote communities, they used when they read the Torah, they use the triennial cycle following the Palestinian model. Palestinian meaning Jews of Palestine, not obviously. They use the triennial cycle. The boys get a mystical certificate called an Aleph, which is basically a certificate of Brit Milah. And this mystical certificate protects them against the demon Lilith. Because what does Lilith do? She attacks babies. She does. And she's a bad demon. And let me go offside for just 1 second because it's so interesting to me how this happened. How did Judaism get demons? Where did they come from in our tradition? How did we get, and also our very intricate system of angels, where did we get all that from? Lana says most likely cross-fertilization from other cultures. Good. Good. From paganism, not so much, but you're on the right track. Who has angels and demons in a big way? The Zoroastrians. And why do they have angels and demons in such a big way, the Zoroastrians? Because they have a duality in God. Very good, Joette. They have a duality in God. There is the God of the heavens who is the good God, the benevolent God. And then there is what we call the demiurge, who is with us, who is evil. Demiurge. D-E-M-I-U-R-G-E, demiurge. That is responsible for all the bad things that go in, that happen in our world. So it would make sense then that there were demons who were involved with the demiurge and angels from above. Okay, so how did we come in contact with that? Through the exile in Babylon. After the destruction of Solomon's temple, we lived in Babylon. Anybody who was anybody lived in Babylon for at least 40 years. So they were exposed to the Zoroastrian theology. When they came back in 538, they brought with them these elements of Zoroastrian theology, which is why we don't find angels and demons early on in our tradition. We find beings that we designate as angels in the Torah. So Abraham, there's a messenger, right? But not the way we know, not the way we're thinking of angels. Which is why in the Second Temple period, which is when the Jews return from exile, we get a proliferation of texts that have angels and demons. So, for instance, in the Apocrypha, which is like part of my favorite stuff to look at, these are books that were part of our tradition but never made it into the Bible. For one reason or other, they were rejected by the rabbis. So in the book of Tobit, we have the demon Asmodeus. In Enoch, we have the demons Azazel, whom we know from Yom Kippur, the goat, Azazel, and also Semyaza. And then in the book of Jubilees, we have the demon Mastema. And all of them wreak havoc on the earth. And then we also have the archangels, Gabriel, Michael, Uriel, and Michael, who are working to subdue the demons. And all this comes from the Zoroastrian tradition to which we were exposed in exile. All right. Yes. Is that why Ezekiel, who was in Babylon, are so... I can't say that's why. Look, I think if we're all really intellectually honest about this, Ezekiel reads like he is experienced some kind of LSD trip. Kind of. And, maybe it shouldn't surprise us. I mean, in the American Indian tradition, those who were considered prophets who could see went into the lodge and smoked peyote and had visions. So there were mind-altering states, mind-altered states, in which these prophets somehow came to understand God's will. I mean, I don't know any other way to read Ezekiel. It's fascinating stuff, but you're like, really? Wow. Okay. Okay. Yes, Cecil.
All right, sorry about that. Sorry, folks. I got a volatile memory, but I read something not that long ago in which they did an analysis of one of our prophets, of the utensils where he mixed things. And he was very well known. He knew very well the different leaves and botanical issues. And they analyzed it by perhaps spectroscopic analysis. There were some hallucinating substances in there. So some of these far-out visions, like the four-face carriage and et cetera, could have been a result of mixing the herbs.
Yes, absolutely. Some kind of hallucinogenic experience. Yes, could be. I'm just throwing something out there. We all revere Ezekiel. He has some beautiful writings, and I'm just throwing that out there. Okay. I don't want you to go around saying, "Oh, Rabbi Mark said Ezekiel was a drug addict," and blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, who knows? I'm just saying. Okay. So So yes, coming back to Lilith, Lilith she was, according to the demon tradition, she was Adam's first wife. And it didn't work out. And it didn't work out because she was a demon. That's true. But it didn't work out basically because she wanted to be equal to him, yes, which meant that during sex, she wanted to be on top. And that was like, yes. It's not in the Torah. It's not in the Torah. These are midrashim. So Lilith has a bad name for us. Lastly, after World War II, many of the Romaniot Jews who survived, and you're going to see very few, but many who did, moved to Israel. Some very small communities still in North Macedonia, but very few in Israel, but very few. There are 2 communities in Israel. Most of them live in Tel Aviv, and they have 2 synagogues that are specific to Romaniot tradition.
Are there traditions leaning more to the Sephardic traditions or Ashkenazic traditions?
Are there traditions leaning more towards the Sephardic or to the Ashkenazic? I would say actually their traditions lean unto themselves, but if we had to pick one, probably more towards Sephardic. But they are traditions unto themselves. They have their own psalms, their own translations, etc. Yes. Overwhelming numbers of Macedonian Jews were wiped out. In fact, we're going to see in a second, there is no community in Europe that suffered worse fate than the Jews of North Macedonia. You're absolutely correct there. All right, so coming back to the Middle Ages, the First Crusade devastated populations in Pelagonia and Skopje, which is the capital. Here is North Macedonia by itself. Jews by that time had risen to prominent members of the community, and the First Crusade was devastating to them. In 1366, we have the first known synagogue, Beit Aharon, House of Aaron, that is in Skopje. And during the Ottoman period, the Jews of North Macedonia were a smaller population. And of course, they grow exponentially after the expulsion from Spain and then Portugal. And the ruler in the Ottoman Empire, Sultan Bayezid II, welcomes all the Sephardim, and he grants all the Jews autonomy. He lets them buy real estate, he lets them erect synagogues, and he permits them to conduct trade. Skopje and Bitola attracted Jews because Skopje was the capital, Bitola was towards the coast, and they attracted them for trade, for banking, for medicine, for law. So we see this over and over and over again wherever we go, right? Wherever our people went, they were valued for what they could do and persecuted for who they were. In 1497, the oldest Jewish cemetery in North Macedonia, at least that they found, comes in Bitola. And so it's always interesting to me. So if Jews are around way before 1497, where were they burying people? Obviously, they didn't have a Jewish cemetery. And I think this happens everywhere. And my guess is that Jews did whatever they had to do. Perhaps they made synagogues in their community, cemeteries in their communities, but they weren't consecrated as cemeteries. They buried people together. I mean, our people had to survive, and they did whatever they had to do wherever they were to survive. And of course, as we've talked about a number of times, there is a very, very important dictum, rabbinic dictum, during medieval times that allows us to do these things, and it was called Dina de Malchuta Dina. Joette, what does that mean?
The law of the land is the law.
Very good. I know she would know. The law of the land is the law. And it was a rabbinic dictum that allowed Jewish communities to exist in countries where we were the distinct minority, which by that time was everywhere, and which had different laws than we did. And what the rabbis said is that, look, if the law of the land contradicts Jewish law, then for your survival, you follow the law of the land. Except
for certain for if they lead you to murder or
incest? Incest.
adultery and incest.
Yes. Or idol worship. So there are three, if I can use Christian terminology because it's easiest to understand, three cardinal sins in Judaism. The three worst sins are what? Idolatry, incest, and murder. Very good. Incest and adultery go together in sexual sins. And so what Jewish law says is if you are required to commit murder, if you are required to commit idolatry, if you are required to commit incest, then you die first. You choose death over the commission of those sins. Those are the three cardinal sins of Judaism. All right. And so there were, we have the oldest cemetery in Bitola. So perhaps there was a law that Jews couldn't have cemeteries. I don't know. I mean, it seems unlikely because the Sultan gave the Jews so much autonomy. But maybe that's why. Because after the influx of Sephardim, after the expulsions, the Sultan gave them autonomy over their communities. They didn't have autonomy over their communities up until then. So that would make sense in 1497, because the expulsions happened in 1492. It takes some time for the people to move around and get there. The Sultan welcomes them, gives them permission to regulate their own affairs. And one of the first things they do is say, we are going now to establish a consecrated Jewish cemetery. And remember that all throughout the Middle Ages, throughout the world of Islam, we were granted autonomy in what were called kihilot, communities. Same thing in Europe, in many cases, where the Jewish communities could decide for themselves, could regulate for themselves Jewish matters. So let's say you were a Jew living in North Macedonia, and you were part of the Ottoman Empire. You had to follow Ottoman civil law. But when it came to religious law, the Beit Din could still decide who can marry whom, what is kosher, what is not kosher, what can be eaten on Passover. I mean, all kinds of things. So we were given limited autonomy that way. All right, and relations with non-Jews were generally good. And they were for most of our time under Islam. There were some, riots and pogroms here and there, but nothing like in Europe. Generally speaking, Muslims and Jews more or less got along as long as the Jews stayed in their place. When we get to the 17th century, the 1600s, there were approximately 3,000 Jews living in North Macedonia, and there were 2 synagogues in Skopje, Beth Aharon and Beth Yaakov. In 1680, Nathan of Gaza died and is buried in Skopje. And it was a pilgrimage site until it was destroyed in World War II. So, tell me about Nathan of Gaza. Nathan of Gaza was a prophet for Shabbatai Tzvi. Tell me about Shabbatai Tzvi. Shabbatai Tzvi. Shabbatai Tzvi. This is a name we should probably know because he lives in infamy. So Shabbatai Tzvi was a religious man who proclaimed himself the Messiah. And there were no. He lived in he lived in the Ottoman Empire, but no, he went to Egypt, so it would have to, I think, in Palestine. I think. Maybe someone can look that up for me. Where did Shabbatai Tzvi live or come from? And he proclaims himself Messiah. And there were a number of religious authorities who kind of bought into it a little bit. There were many who didn't, and there were some who did. But there were a large part of the people who did. Many Jews bought into his claim of being the Messiah. The idea of false messiahs, they come up when? Whenever the Jews are in trouble. Good, that's the right answer. Whenever the Jews are in trouble. When things are really bad, the idea of a Messiah, someone to save the day, comes up. Clearly that's the case with Jesus. Clearly. And we have a similar case now with Shabbatai Tzvi. And he goes to the Sultan and he proclaims himself as the Messiah. And the Sultan says, "Oh, that's nice. I'm very amused. Convert to Islam or die."
It was from
Turkey. Turkey. Thank you so much. Shabbatai Tzvi was from Turkey. Thank you, Joette. And so the Sultan gives him this ultimatum. And what does Shabbatai Tzvi do? He converts to Islam.
No, but it was after many of the Jews sold all their belongings.
Yes. After many of the Jews had like given up everything to follow him. And so it was, you can imagine, it was a huge slap in the face to so many Jews who had looked at him as Messiah, and then he converts to Islam.
So it says here, Rabbi, that about 300 families also followed him and converted.
About 300 families also followed him and converted, Rosalie says. So this is Shabbatai Tzvi, and the person we're talking about is Nathan of Gaza, who was one of his primary followers and primary advisors, primary people who were building up his reputation. And so by 1680, a little bit after, we have 9 synagogues in Bitola, 3 in Skopje, and 2 in the city of Stip. So remember, we have about 3,000 Jews at this point. So this is the right number of synagogues, right? 9, 12, 13, 14 synagogues. All right. Fire destroyed Skopje in 1689. In Skopje itself, as we had said, the 3,000 of 60,000 total people within the country of North Macedonia. 3,000 out of 60,000. That was our percentage of the population. And the Jews of Skopje were almost entirely Sephardic. The Romaniot Jews, remember, Skopje and Pelagonia, but by the time after the expulsions, Skopje, the city of Skopje, had almost entirely Sephardic Jews who were speaking Ladino. In 1863, a fire destroyed Bitola, and in 1895, the Alliance Israélite Universelle, which was French, was established. And so then a number of North Macedonian Jews were speaking French. So we had French, Yavanic, we had Ladino, you had many, many different languages in the country of North Macedonia among Jewish populations. The Jews of North Macedonia gained their rights of citizenship because they were part of the Kingdom of Serbia. Serbia had conquered North Macedonia in the 1913 Second Balkan War, and as a result of that war, the Jews of that region, which had now been incorporated into the Kingdom of Serbia, were granted civil rights to become citizens. Prior to World War II, we had 8,000 Jews in Bitola, 3,000 in Skopje, which we just talked about, and 500 in another city called Stip. In March 1941, Bulgaria becomes part of the Axis becomes part of the Axis powers during World War II, and then in April, it invades North Macedonia, which is part of the Kingdom of Serbia at this point. And in October, the Bulgarians said that Jews could not engage in commerce anymore, and they were forced to sell all their businesses to non-Jews. The Bulgarians established ghettos in Bitola, and over the course of 1942, there was an increasingly harsh demand. Jewish households had to hand over 20% of their assets. Then Greek Jewry is deported to the border, and then German trains and boats to Treblinka in Poland. Almost the entire Jewish population of North Macedonia ends up going to Treblinka. And nobody survives. Nobody makes it back. Nobody. How were there still North Macedonian Jews after World War II? Because some/many, whoever could, joined the partisans who were fighting in Yugoslavia. So they fled and they joined the partisans who lived in the woods and they fought the Nazis. In March 11th, 1943, The rest of the entire Jewish population of Skopje, Bitola, and Stip, over 7,200 Jews, were rounded up and sent off. Let me see, 10:53. I just have we okay for a little bit longer? Okay, good. In 1943, Roosevelt, he discussed saving the 60 or 70,000 total Jews that Bulgaria had detained from various countries for execution. And Roosevelt's decision was, look, if we save the Jews of Poland, if we save these Jews of Bulgaria, then the Jews of Poland and Germany will want us to do the same thing for them, and we don't have enough ships to do that, so we won't. I thought that Bulgaria was a country that didn't send their Jews. That was Morocco, that we did last week. Morocco, the king said, you can't have the Jews of Morocco. I'll check on that for you. I'll check on. The question was, I thought Bulgaria was a country that didn't send its Jews. Let me check on that for you. Zisel.
I read somewhere during World War II, some of the Jewish organizations were lobbying President Roosevelt to bomb the rails that led into the extermination camps, and it was nixed. The excuse was those bombs were needed elsewhere.
That's exactly right. In 1944, we have the liberation of Macedonia. There are from the Axis powers. There were only 419 surviving Jews. Of those that went to the death camps, nobody survived. And of those 419, many left for Israel. In 1952, there were 81 Jews in North Macedonia. Presently, there are about 200 Jewish families in Skopje at the Beth Yaakov synagogue, which has a traveling rabbi that goes to Belgrade, Serbia, back and forth between. And lastly, in 2011, the Holocaust Museum in Skopje opened, which is one of the top Holocaust museums in all of Europe. And no Jewish community suffered greater than the Jews of North Macedonia, which is exactly what Gary had said earlier. All right, everyone. On that happy note, yes. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Wish me luck this afternoon. And have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Don't leave. Tell us all about it.
I think the citizens was a misnomer in terms of trying to say that
What did it say? What did it say?
they couldn't afford it because there were organizations that couldn't.
I just gave it to him, but he just passed it on to you.
You know what? This is called respect.
There you go. She just said that. So I'm gonna take a look at that this week. Thank you. Thank you. So you know what it might be? It might be that the Nazis deported those people, but the Bulgarians.
Well, the Swedes were initially aligned with the Nazis and then switched.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that.
Good morning. Good morning.
5 months before I found out he was Jewish. And I want to thank you for
Oh, really? Thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me do it.
Okay. Anytime. Okay, folks.
my grandchildren are rabbis already. All of my sons are rabbis.
זמן לקבל את הקפה והעוגיות ולשבת. In English translation, time to make sure you have your cookies and your coffee and you sit. Sounds better in Hebrew. Okie dokie. Good morning. It looks to me from what I erased that you were doing a whole lot of terrorist discussion this morning. Was that true?
That was just very much, a little bit at the beginning, which was left over from a question from last week.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Most of it was the map on the other side, North Macedonia.
Oh, North Macedonia. Are you on N's or M's? Ah, I see. Welcome to everybody. Good morning, those of you at home. Last week, we were talking about taking care of parents and finishing that up, and we're into the text on taking care of children. And I don't remember, I have to tell you, I don't remember how far we got on that. Did we get on children? Okay. So I don't think we did this, though. You'll have to tell me, and I will pass it out to you. Do you remember doing this? I don't think we did. No. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, folks. So Joette, are you gonna, oh, Joette's answering her phone, so could have somebody else? Let's join together in the blessing for learning, which means you can't look at the text and do the blessing for learning at the same time. Oh my God, incorrigible. Let's do the blessing for learning. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let's jump into the text. We have one from the Talmud Sukkah 46b. These are really important texts about how we take care of children and how we raise children. And one of the, well, let's go into it. So would somebody read, and Rabbi Zera said? I'm holding up the mic for you, whoever you are. Rosalie.
And Rabbi Zera said, a person should not say to a child, I will give you something, and then not give it to him, because he thereby comes to teach him about lying, as it is stated. They have taught their tongues to speak lies, Jeremiah 9:4. One must not accustom a child to fail to honor commitments.
So this is in Tractate Sukkot, Talmud 46b. I think it's a great text. Anybody have a comment about it from today's viewpoint? Cecil, you can come up and do that.
I didn't hear well. Did you say any comments
On it, particularly from a modern perspective.
Well, right at the beginning, about not lying to a child, and first blush, lying to anybody is not good. But why? Why a child? And that, in my mind, goes back to an old Spanish saying. I'll say it in Spanish and then I'll translate it in English. Árbol que crece torcido, su tronco jamás endereza. The tree who grows with its trunk twisted never
You shared
straightens
that.
out.
You shared that last week.
Oh, I'm consistent.
Okay, good. So I absolutely love this text because this text could be written any time, right? Any generation. But it is fascinating and important that it was written more than 1,000 years ago, and like 1,500 years ago. So what's interesting about it is that we learn something not only about care for children, but we learn something about the Jewish society in which we lived at the time of the Talmud, which is, we think about ancient times, like really ancient times, way beyond medieval times, and we think they were so, pretty much primitive, right? And we rule out some of the things that are said in Jewish law over that period of time when we're reading, because After all, we are so much more advanced. I mean, how many people would agree that we kind of judge past generations differently? But here you are with a text that might have been done in the 3rd century of the Common Era, actually 2,000 years ago, and it's today. Be careful when you're raising children. Be careful with anybody not to lie, but particularly be careful when you're raising children because they watch you. I like country music, so because it has a lot of nice themes in it beyond beer and trucks. So, but one of the songs is about a child where the child does or says several things, and the child says in the song, "Dad, I've been watching you. I'm going to eat my food and little kid and do these things so that one day I can grow up big and strong and like you." It's a beautiful song because it really is really exactly this Talmudic text. Now, in their lives, they had a lot less assistance in terms of preparing food, cleaning things, working fields, doing all of the things that they did. And yet, a major thing in this tractate is about making sure that you're taking the time and energy and thought about what you're saying and what you're modeling for your children. Now, here's a question. Before you go reading other things that are not, yeah?
I think that in the olden days, people were very busy out in the field or just working, and they thought more about life and how to raise their children, how to deal with parents. And now we're in such a rush society, I don't think we give enough time. We may be smarter, but not necessarily wiser. And even if people weren't able to read, they were able to express themselves, and they were able to read people better because life was slower and there was more time for that. Now everything's rush, rush, rush. We don't have time for anything.
Okay, that's, okay, come on down. We'll do a Monty Hall for Let's Make
It's
a
a
Deal.
little bit connected, but there is a story from Hungary, of course.
Loud as you can.
And thank you. And an older lady who had Parkinson is eating from a wooden plate, and the child is watching and goes to the mother and said, "When you get old, don't worry, I will make a wooden plate for you too." And then the mother realized what they are doing and started to give regular
Because she
plate.
only had a wooden plate, right?
No, it's just for her what a wooden plate because was
Oh.
afraid that we'll break it. And when the child said, "I will give it to you too," that's when realized that the child is watching. And so they put away the wooden plate and gave the regular plate for the parents.
Thank you. Good example.
So you mentioned a song, and a song right away came to my mind.
Look at everybody.
Okay, it's The Cat's in the Cradle. You all know that
Oh,
song.
yes.
Yeah. So I want to be just like you, Dad. I want to be just like you.
Right.
You know.
But that father never had enough time
Right.
for their child. Right.
Right. Exactly. And then the
Right.
child didn't have enough time for the father.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. So, no, it was not Cat Stevens. No. Somebody's got a phone. Look it up. It is Cat Stevens? Okay, then it was.
And then there's the Barbra Streisand, Children Will Listen, you know, that song.
Yeah. So, okay, so what that tells us, that there are a lot of songs written about this, is that, what? Who was it? So, what that tells us is this is very much in the minds of people throughout the generations. But I want to know something. This is a more difficult question. Why is it in Tractate Sukkah? Why is it in the volume of the Talmud that is about Sukkot? This is a deeper question, so I want... enclosed area, sukkah, right? Right, but open, but a small area, then families involved. Anybody else? This is a much deeper Jewish question. We have two different types of things when we're talking about Sukkot. One is when we're talking about Sukkot that it's a harvest festival. The other version of the Sukkot is a little bit more historical, that picks up on a number of things. So, for example, one of the things people hang in a sukkah and do every night in the sukkah is something called an ushpizin. Ushpizin means that every night of Sukkot, you're going to welcome symbolically an historical Jewish figure into the sukkah. Why? Because the sukkah is also representative of our patriarch Avraham, and our patriarch Avraham was known for a particular trait: hospitality, and directness and clarity with regard to other people and welcoming them. So it shows up in Masechet, in the tractate, in the volume of Sukkah, in order to teach us that there are a number of ways that we emulate people who, instead of lying or shutting down or not being compassionate, that we are supposed to emulate people who are indeed compassionate and aware and dedicated. So that's why this is in that particular volume of Talmud. And I've said many, many, many times that the rabbis might be talking about how big the sukkah needs to be and what kind of branches need to be on it, and don't be under a tree, and don't be built on a ship, all of which is in Tractate Sukkot. But then they always go off on tangents. So they go off in this case in the tangent about how do you treat other people, and then down to how do you treat your children. So there's a different depth here than just this one paragraph. So any comments about any of this? Okay, we go on. Anybody want to read the next text about Gorgias of Lydda? Sure. Come on up.
It is related of the son of Gorgias of Lydda that he ran away from school, and his father pointed to his ear. In fear of his father, he went and destroyed himself in a pit. They went and inquired of Rabbi Tarfon, who ruled. We do not withhold anything from him.
This is a difficult and complicated text. So Gorgias of Lydda is obviously a boy. I don't know how old he is, a boy, but when his father finds out that he cut school, all his father does is what? What does that mean? Oh, he heard a lie? That's a good one. That's a good one, but I'm not sure that's the whole story. Yes, it was a well-known punishment that gets mentioned in the Talmud a lot, to box somebody's ears, which is apparently extremely painful and can, if affected in a particular way, basically harm somebody's hearing for the rest of their life. Edison lost his hearing from being hit on the ear?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. So
pointed to the boy's ear?
the father pointed to his ear, I think. Hold on. Maseh, I'm looking it out. Be'ozno. It's unclear actually. Aviv be'ozno, it could be his father to his ear, or it could be his father pointing to the kid's ear. Anyway, the result is the same. It means that the father was intent on a huge punishment to his child, a physical punishment to his child. But in addition to that, it lets the child know that he's beyond disappointed about the child in a very, 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 very serious way in that society. So what does Gorgias do? He commits the son of Gorgias, right? The son of Gorgias, he commits suicide. So then this Rabbi Tarfon, who was a tremendously important Talmudic rabbi, he rules, because people went and asked, what do we do now? This kid committed suicide because his father threatened him. What would generally happen if somebody commits suicide in classic Jewish law?
I thought a long time ago that when you commit suicide, they bury you right next to the fence.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if you commit suicide, you are not allowed to be buried in the cemetery with everybody else. If you commit suicide, why? Because God gives you life. God gives, God takes away. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach, that's what we say. And God's name should be blessed. In other words, if we choose to do away with the life that God has given us, there are consequences to it. And so the consequences are, doesn't happen all the time now, but sometimes it still does, which is you couldn't be buried in your family plot. You couldn't be buried inside the fences of the cemetery. You had to be buried right outside, which means that anybody who would see your grave from then on would know that you took your own life, thereby convincing other people to find a therapist instead, or to try and work through their troubles. I'm not making fun of people who are in that situation. Tell me what it means. What does it mean, Rosalie? What does it mean? Right.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Whatever that person gets, he gets. So yes, I mean, because in those kinds of cases, in a funeral service, sorry, Rosalie.
I'm still unclear. I mean, is he not being buried in sacred ground?
Everything, we do not withhold anything from him, which means
he can be buried.
This child is not responsible
Right.
for the horrible thing that happened because his father terrified him. So therefore, that child or young adult or whatever it is, whoever's studying, can be buried in the cemetery, can have a regular funeral service, can have a eulogy done for them, can have
Okay.
all of that. So Rabbi Tarfon, who you'll come across again when you have your Pesach Seder, anyway, he says, no, we are not penalizing this kid for what happened to him.
So these were special circumstances.
These were the circumstances. I don't know if I can bring this. Why don't you say it? That's a very, very good question, Janice. I don't. Oh, what happens to the father that did this to his son? And I don't know the answer to that question. There isn't an answer that comes up right after we hear Rabbi Tarfon's decision. So I'm not sure. Now I need to find out.
He needs to live with himself.
That's.
Seems like this is a lesson to parents.
This seems like this is a lesson to parents. So, yes, I mean, sometimes we just get really angry when we are raising children. And hopefully we don't use physical, physical punishment. But by the way, neither did Gorgias, right? He did not actually hit, he threatened him.
But it seems like that was enough because maybe before that he had used.
Did you want to say something?
He had used physical punishment before that.
Right. So one can assume that you are right and that before this point there already was a history of maybe physical abuse or maybe just mental abuse, right? So that's what you.
I read ahead a little bit, so
Oh, okay.
it clarified something here.
All right, but let's go on. Okay. So before we do, okay. Before we go on, because it's another story, Joette?
Question, is this man Gorgias mentioned again at any other time?
I don't. Hold on. I think that the answer is yes. I'm not. Yes, is Gorgios mentioned any other place in the Talmud? And I believe that the answer is yes, but I would not lay my life on it. No, this is real. This is a real person. Because you have not only what his name is, but where is he from? He's from Lod, right? Lida.
He lived near the airport.
Live near the airport.
It's a real punishment to put it in writing like this. Because then
Yeah, because you're there forever, right? Forever. But here's the thing. The thing is, it was really important to say this wasn't actually physical. Because the rabbis are not only saying to people, you are not allowed to give that kind of terrifying corporal punishment, but they are also saying something that is much more modern. And also, I need to let you know, because I love Talmud and I love Judaism, other cultures did not write things like this. The father was completely in charge of that child. The father could do whatever he wanted to a child of his. And we still see that happening in cultures. In Islam, it happens when, particularly when a daughter does something that the family doesn't like. And the reason that I know that this more than what we hear about that culture is that one of my cousin's kids works for Magen David Adom, and this is not a normal time, but in a normal time, he used to write that they were out in the ambulance more times because Muslim girls had been attacked by their parent, by their father, or killed, than any other thing they were called for. So cultures still do this, but our tradition tells us, no, you are the boss of your kids, but there's a stopping point with regard to that.
I have a question.
Okay. Sorry, everything's getting stuck here.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. And I don't know if that's a biblical
thank you.
reference.
It's
or-
not, it's,
Is
I
that
don't know.
Shakespeare? I don't know where.
I
it
don't know
came
what
from.
it is either, but
Okay.
I've never read it in the Gemara or
Oh,
in the
yeah.
Torah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
was
I don't
wondering
know.
if-
Anybody else read it in the Torah? Okay.
Okay.
What do you want to say, Jennison? I'll convey it. Just a minute. Zisel. I can't hear her, so just wait a minute, please. Okay.
Okay, so I was a teacher. At this moment, I had a class of third grade,
Okay. Janice was a teacher. She had a class of third graders.
and they wanted me to do something, and I didn't think I could.
They wanted you to do something and you didn't think you could.
So I said to the children, I do not make promises I cannot keep.
Oh, so you said to the children, I do not make promises I cannot keep. Right. So that goes with the first text that we read about not lying to your children and promising them a pony and never, never actually getting it. Melinda, do you want to come up or do you want me to say what you're saying?
We said before, we don't know how old a child is, and he ran away from school. Maybe he was already hit by the father. It doesn't say it was the first time the father pointed to his ear. So if he had done
Hold the
something
mic
bad,
next to you.
if he had done something wrong before, maybe he was already abused physically and said, I'm done.
Yes, I think a number of people alluded to
Right.
that, but I'm glad that you said it directly like this. Obviously, there's a history here. If there were not a history here, a kid would never understand what somebody meant when they were pointing to their ear. I mean, it's clearly something that's been going on in their family for a long time. Let's go to the next text.
About promises in religious homes, I found that they don't promise anything.
I see.
Be able to keep your promise.
Okay, so about promises in religious homes, they don't promise anything because they can't be sure that they're going to be able to keep that. In Judaism, you say bli neder, which means without an oath. So somebody can intend to do something, but if they are knowledgeable about this, they will say to the person, I'm going to do this, but I cannot make a personal oath on it. But I don't think that has to do with, just whether I'm going to get you the doll for your birthday or something. But maybe these are serious things when you say bli neder. But I think you're right. That does come up. Let's go on to the next text, please. Okay. Who's going to read this one? Come on up.
It's okay. I don't know if this works as well. It is related of a child in Bnei Barak that he broke a bottle on the Sabbath, and his father pointed to his ear.
Again.
Same thing. In fear of his father, he went and destroyed himself in a pit. Again.
Okay, but now we have more.
They inquired of Rabbi Akiba, who ruled, "We do not withhold anything from him."
Okay, I put this in even though it is the same, because obviously these are written at two different times. You don't have Gorgia's name here, and you have Rabbi Akiba. This is interesting because it could be that the Gorgia case started an awareness. It could be that this is another case, but it's too similar to be that. But it shows up in a couple of different places in the Talmud. But here's the kicker.
Hence, the sages ruled a man should not point at the ear of a child, but either punish him immediately or keep silent and say nothing to him.
Okay, so what's that? So obviously they reused the Gorgia text and they put on a conclusion. So now we get to an even different spot. Don't point to the ear of a child. It could be because the child's experienced the physical thing before. It could be the emotional thing. But, Joette?
Perhaps it means not to threaten the child and have the child wait in fear, but to take care of whatever it is at the moment that it happens.
Right. So anybody have any comment that you want to make about this? So now we know you don't do these horrible things to children. You know that it can be emotional terror, it can be physical terror, but also as a good parent, as a regular parent, you never know how your child is going to react to something. So what do? When something has been done wrong or you want to punish a child? Right away. Yes?
I think you have to evaluate. They say not to point to the ear, but then either punish him immediately if it was not an accident, if it was intentional, and if you were there, you would know. But if it was an accident, then you would maybe keep silent and say nothing because it wasn't the child's fault.
Right. So don't, in other words, don't do anything to indicate that you are furious and could do something to your child when they do something wrong. Either correct it, punish it, not in a horrible way, punish it, or let it go. Now, the only thing I can think of that makes me laugh about myself is that when you're training a new dog, if the dog does something, you have to, as far as I know, I never had a dog, but a lot of my friends have dogs. You have to correct the thing right away with the dog. So what we're learning is that it's the same thing with regard to human beings. You can't make somebody terrified over a long period of time. So does this mean that parents can punish their children?
No, it means you can punish your children.
Yes.
But it should be appropriate and timely.
Appropriate and timely. Okay, are we good? Okay. This came from Tractate Smachot. And so I told you what Tractate Smachot is. So that you can see it. We don't need to discuss it. It's not another text. Here's my favorite one. On the last page, Midrash Rabbah. Midrash Rabbah is a midrash. It's not a Talmudic text. You have it, right? Yeah, come on down and read. There's a midrash for every book of the Torah. And this is not a Talmudic text. This is from a midrash that comes out of the book of Exodus. So it's a learning example. Okay, go ahead.
An example may be learned from a man who opened a perfumery for his son in a marketplace frequented by prostitutes. The businesses in the area went their own way. The prostitutes went their way, and the young man went his way to a bad end. Maybe, depending on who's talking here. His father came and, catching him with the prostitutes, began to shout, "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" A friend who was present said to the father, "You caused your son to go astray, and now you're shouting at him? You ignored all other trades and taught him the perfume business, and you ignored all other business streets and opened a shop for him in the middle of the red light district? What can you expect?"
Right. Comments?
Well, he taught him a trade.
He taught him a trade, which we learned about. He's supposed to teach him a trade.
No, what I just caught now that I thought was interesting, that they called it way back then the red light district.
Yeah, that's
And we use that phrase now, too,
where does it?
right at the very end.
Oh,
Open it.
that's because this is an English translation.
Oh,
Hold on.
okay.
They don't have lights like we have now.
It's a paraphrase. Yeah, the actual thing. Actually, part of this, the end of this says, it's like you took him before the golden calf, you know, and stood him there with all the gold of the golden calf. So that's what he means. That they translated it red light district. Anybody else? Because Ziesel's had a lot of commentary time. We'll do you next, Cecil.
I say a lot too. This is the wrong profession, so I think the father made a mistake in terms of setting him up with his perfumery. So, but there might be other types of trades that are not acceptable as well, but I don't know what they are.
Well, Ziesel, do you have a comment about the trade?
I do. It's a simple example to tell us that don't complain about the consequences of your actions. When you do something, there is an equal and opposite reaction. That's what physics tells us. So what you do and what you receive is, don't complain about what you receive and forget about what you do.
Right. I just absolutely love this story. I mean, too bad for the son, but it lets us know that our value systems, once again, need to be extremely clear. And we need to be able to know that it might, here's the link. Remember the father where the son gives him fatted chicken and all sorts of yummy foods and then totally berates him, and then they show the example of the other son who makes his father work in the wheat grinding place because he wants to protect him from the army. Are you guys okay? Oh. No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure you were well.
This is interesting, because that was my area of law, child abuse.
Oh, wow.
And certainly,
That was your area of law, was child abuse. Oh, I would love to have you say something when you're back next week. Okay. So let me tell you why I have these things, and then we're going to go. I don't know what time it is, but we'll go on a little bit. Okay. I think that these things, when I studied them and when I find them, just make me so proud. These are not things that we find in a lot of texts. And I've told you a number of times, one of the wonderful things about Jewish texts are that we don't erase anything. So this guy who's the father who owns the perfumery and sets his son up, they could have been a very, very wealthy person at the time that this Midrash was conveyed. Midrash is even older than Talmud, by the way. So it could have been a very important person. And there are a number of very important people, including rabbis, in these texts. And all their problematic stories are still there for us. They don't erase them. And, you know, not with Rabbi Yochanan, remember that? I mean, these great people their foibles, and worse than foibles, they're really horrible things they do, are not erased. Why is that? Because Jewish law and Jewish teachers cared more about us and other people in their society and the generations to come learning appropriate ethics. And that's an incredible gift. Nothing is withheld.
So I just wanted to say, my husband taught a comparative Jewish law course at UJ. And one of the things he always said is that the rabbis and the laws of Judaism are just like our legal system. I mean, they dealt with everything, you know, and they had rules and regulations for everything. And they still do, but, you know.
There's a lot that's written in inceptions of legal literature, both in what's now Great Britain and England and in the United States, about the effect of Jewish legal texts on the process of law that comes about. So I'm out of texts for today. The other ones I have sitting here are the ones that we did before. Does anybody else have a comment? I'm sorry if it's early. Yes.
The important lesson is that we learn from our mistakes, and that's why these things are written. I'm sorry. The important thing is that we learn from our mistakes. And the rabbis wrote these things down to show examples of how we can learn to improve ourselves and avoid those mistakes. When we personally make mistakes and fail to learn from them, we're going to repeat them. You know, a mistake is an opportunity to grow.
Generally, the rabbinic text would say, if you make an error or you break a law or you do something wrong and you don't ever have to deal with those mistakes, the next time you do it worse. And the next time after that you do it worse because you become inured to what it is that you're doing, and it doesn't bother you anymore. The first time may bother you, but if you continue in that path, the Talmud, what the Talmud indicates is it gets worse and worse, which is maybe another reason, thank you, why they put it all out there right away. Go ahead.
In relation to what Berna said about Jewish law and secular law, it reminds me of Rabbi Benzi Bergman of blessed memory. He was a Talmud scholar. His daughter became an attorney, and they would discuss law back and forth, and she challenged him to go to law school, and he did, and so he also became an attorney in addition to being a Talmud scholar rabbi.
My mother taught me not to lie. And the reason was, if you lie, you have to have a good memory. So I grew up knowing that, and I really made it a point not to say things to my children that I could not do.
That's funny and lovely. All right, I want to talk about next week for a moment. Next week on Wednesday evening and Thursday is Tu B'Shvat. And I already told you that I'm going, even though my class is over theoretically next week, that I'm going to do one more week with you when Rabbi Shulden Fry is just getting back from Israel. So I do? I thought the 31st. Oh, okay. 2 more weeks and then the one. Okay. I'm happy about that. That's good. Thank you. I better find some texts for it, though. What I'd like to do next week is I'd like to do some text. Does everybody know a whole heck of a lot about Tu B'Shvat? So since it starts that night, I know some of you do, but what I'd like to do is take a breather from these texts and go into some things about Tu B'Shvat. But in doing so, I would love it if we could have a small Tu B'Shvat Seder. So what I wanted to ask about is either would Sisterhood be willing to fund a very small Tu B'Shvat Seder, and or could we ask if people are willing to volunteer to bring something for the Tu B'Shvat Seder? And then we can learn and we can eat, because a Tu B'Shvat Seder is having different kinds of fruits and different kinds of juice or wines and nuts. It would be here. We would just do it here. It will be our same class time. So do you have the list of everybody in the class?
Yes, Susie does. Maybe you, Susie, and I can talk about it in terms of what we can prepare for that. Which day would it be?
I don't mind. Like, I'm sure that people won't mind if we ask them to bring, like, a bag of almonds or something like that. But what? So if we have a list of the class, then I'll write to everybody and we can fill in other things. But I think it would be fun.
When would this be now? What date?
Right now, next week.
Next week?
Because what's today? What's the date today? So Tu B'Shvat is, I believe, next Wednesday night and Thursday. Somebody want to look that up? Right. Okay, so that's why I want to do it on Wednesday, because Wednesday night starts Tu B'Shvat, and I think it could really be fun and a change of pace.
Okay, well, we'll talk to Diana. Maybe she can help us with preparation. Yeah, we'll talk to you about it, what we need to have.
I think that I will write to you. I think what we need is, instead of having the chairs like this, I think we should have a few tables and the chairs around the table, and then we'll all make it work together. Like we'll get paper plates and little cups and try. Somebody has a nice accordion going here. Okay, so is there an objection to that?
Sounds great.
Platters? Okay, well, I think it might be more cost effective and also a little bit more fun if somebody brings grapes and somebody brings almonds and somebody brings dates and somebody, whatever people can bring, we'll just do a list and somebody can say yes to it. And if you can't do it, then we'll fill in with something else.
Send out a list and we can pick something.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah. Exactly. I think I just realized as I was looking at things that I thought it would be fun and something different to do, and then we can actually do a Tu B'Shvat Seder and learn about all of these different things and why we have a Seder for Tu B'Shvat, etc. Pardon?
I mean, we'll talk about it.
Okay. Are you okay with it? Okay. So don't miss next week. It'll be really nice. And please, if you can, bring something due. And just mark it off the list and let us know. Okay.
I don't think Joette's going to be. You're going to miss you. You're going to be in Florida.
Where are you going this time?
Cousins reunion in Florida.
How fun. Where are you going?
Cousins reunion, Florida. Taking a 4 days.
So I'll be here. Everybody else is in Israel.
So we'll wait to get the note, the thing in the email. We'll wait for our email.
Yes, because I have to give you the list of what you, what you have at a Tu B'Shvat Seder.
Okay.
Are you gonna have places for us, and the list, should we each like say what we're gonna bring? Respond to you?
Yeah, and I'll let people know if there's a duplicate, what's left to bring or whatever. So we'll do it as best we can.
Well, if we reply to all, then everybody will see what's
Everybody will
already
know.
chosen.
Right.
You'll send a list of
Appropriate thing.
volunteer for whatever you can, and you'll send back to the people who's to bring what.
Right.
We don't have to.
Yeah.
No, they're
No,
not.
you're gonna,
I'm
you're
gonna
gonna
say
get
one of three things.
People
I'll
are-
bring three things. Make sure she gets it, because somebody else can do three things, and somebody else can do three things.
Yes, I'm
Somebody's
going
gonna
to
do-
I'm going to send the list.
No, that's not what she's
I'm
gonna
going to send the list. People will write what they want to bring.
Right.
I will send back to everybody. If there's an overlap, I will contact the other person who overlapped and say, can you bring this instead?
Okay.
Adrian already said she wanted to make it.
Dates? Okay. Great. I mean, we could do it while we're sitting here for a minute if you
It
want
would
to.
be easy.
So we'll have to have the room rearranged.
Yeah, I would just get like